In this presentation, we are going to highlight the celestial signs that represent the birth of Jesus narrative. Structurally, we will look at the celestial sign, its date, and relate it to its corresponding biblical verse, matching context, description, and time frame as specified. In conclusion, we will arrive at the precise date that Jesus was born when he died, and therefore when he returns. Finally, we will come to realize that the date Jesus is born is a key to unlocking many other prophecies, including the Revelation.
Discussion. We are going to be talking about celestial events. One might ask, in what manner is this subject biblical? To answer that question, we need to go all the way back to the 14th verse of Genesis chapter 1. Genesis 1 verse 14. And God said, Let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs, and for seasons, and for days, and years. God said, His celestial objects were designed for much more than lights and a basis upon which to regulate our days, months, and years. He also created them for signs and seasons. The concept of a sign, via Strong's, is off, that is a beacon or a signal. Signs are alerts, things that can be noticed. There is an additional related concept, called uth, which is, that, these things are consented, they are agreements. The sign is designed to agree with the verse in which it was appointed to timestamp. A season is, mo or dor, an appointment. It firstly refers to the festival appointments of the law of Moses. However, all of these festivals are also analogies for future prophetic appointed times. So in general, these are times of meeting. In terms of the festival, it's people gathering to meet each other. In terms of the celestial signs, the celestial sign is meeting the event on the earth in synchronicity, time-stamping it. One might think that because the verse says seasons, it is referring to our weather-related seasons. The seasons are generated because of the tilt that the Earth's axis is on with respect to its orbital plane around the Sun. The seasons are related primarily to the Earth's tilt, of which the verse does not actually mention. So primarily, the word season is there to tell us that it means appointed times in terms of prophetic, appointed times, and not the appointed times of weather seasons. So in conclusion, God made the celestial objects for signs and for seasons, means He made them to be beacons or markers that will happen in synchronicity. With an earthly prophetic appointed event and timestamp it, if we have an application that can relocate it, after the fact. The celestial signs that we are going to track within modern astronomy application software are all the signs related to the appointed times of the Nativity narrative of the birth of Jesus. If it is true that it is possible, in these high-tech latter days, to view the celestial signs in order to understand the exact appointed time, dates, that those events were happening on the earth, then I respectfully say, the debate whether there is a God or not has ended. All arguments as to whether there was a God that created the universe have ended. Any discussion as to whether the Bible is God's word or not has ended. These signs begin, March 12, 8 BCE. Why March 12, 8 BCE? March 12, 8 BCE equates to Nissan 1 in the Hebrew calendar of that year. As we turn up the Hebrew calendar, we can see that March 12, 8 BCE shows Nissan 3. However, this calendar is slightly inaccurate. What is important is that it reads the correct month of Nissan. We can turn to March 12, 8 BCE in the Stellarium astronomy application and see that it is a new moon, which is confirmation that it is actually Nissan 1. Why 8 BCE? As we examine the historical date of the death of Herod, we find that Herod died in 4 BC. This is confirmed by a blood moon that occurred on a Jewish fast day called the Fast of Purim. In his book, Antiquities of the Jews. Book 17 chapter 6, section 4, specifies, on the night before that day when the fast was to be celebrated. That very night there was an eclipse of the moon. This was not just some ad hoc time of fasting. This was, as Josephus wrote, an observed fast day, that very day which the Jews observed as a fast. Here's the full accounting that includes the blood moon on a regularly celebrated fast day. But the people, on account of Herod's barbarous temper, and for fear he should be so cruel and to inflict punishment on them, said what was done without their approbation. And that it seemed to them that the actors might well be punished for what they had done. But as for Herod, he dealt more mildly with others, but he deprived Matthias of the high priesthood, as in part an occasion of this action, and made Joseph, who was Matthias's wife's brother, high priest in his stead. Now it happened, that during the time of the high priesthood of this Matthias, there was another person made high priest for a single day, that very day which the Jews observed as a fast. The occasion was this: Matthias the high priest, on the night before that day when the fast was to be celebrated, seemed, in a dream, to have conversation with his wife. And because he could not officiate himself on that account, Joseph, the son of Elymas, his kinsman, assisted him in that sacred office. But Herod deprived this Matthias of the high priesthood, and burnt the other Matthias, who had raised the sedition, with his companions, alive. And that very night there was an eclipse of the moon. Herod was very sick at this time, and it affected his decisions and his moods. One of these decisions, made out of this incredible illness that he suffered to death, was a decision to kill all the children in Bethlehem they could find that were age 2 and younger. Josephus says Herod died, and his son Archelaus conducted 7 days of mourning. Chapter 8, Section 4. Now Archelaus paid him so much respect, as to continue his mourning till the 7th day, for so many days are appointed for it by the law of our fathers. In Chapter 9, a sedition was raised. Section 1. At this time also it was that some of the Jews got together out of a desire of innovation. They lamented Matthias, and those that were slain with him by Herod, who had not any respect paid them by a funeral mourning, out of the fear men were in of that man. They were those who had been condemned for pulling down the golden eagle. In short order, it reads as though, within the week of the completed 7 days of mourning, a Passover approached. Chapter 9, Section 3. Now, upon the approach of that feast of unleavened bread, which the law of their fathers had appointed for the Jews at this time, which feast is called the Passover. By the end of Section 3, the sedition had made its way into the middle of the Passover celebration. Archelaus sent out the whole army upon them, and sent the horsemen to prevent those that had their tents without the temple from assisting those that were within the temple, and to kill such as ran away from the footmen when they thought themselves out of danger, which horsemen slew 3,000 men, while the rest went to the neighbouring mountains. Then did Archelaus order proclamation to be made to them all, that they should retire to their own homes. And so the Passover ended up in bloodshed. Now, it's not difficult to research what the celebrated fast days for the nation of Israel are to find that there's only one fast day that comes about 1 month before the Passover. That is the Book of Esther's, Fast of Purim, celebrated every year on Adar 13 as the day of fasting, followed by Adar 14 and 15 are as festival day. Esther 3 verse 13. And the letters were sent by posts into all the king's provinces, to destroy, to kill, and to cause to perish all Jews, both young and old, little children and women, in 1 day. Even upon the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month Adar, and to take the spoil of them for a prey. The lot that Haman cast eventually fell on Adar 13. It took about 347 throwings of the lot before it finally said yes to Adar 13 as the genocide of the Jews' date. Esther 9 verse 18. But the Jews that were at Shushan assembled together on the 13th day thereof, and on the 14th thereof. And on the 15th day of the same they rested, and made it a day of feasting and gladness. So the genocide attempt did not succeed. Instead, the Jews were able to kill their enemies on Adar 13. The law was set, and the date could not change. However, they were able to create a new law that allowed them to defend themselves without repercussion. As a result of this blood moon on March 13th and Adar 13, a few weeks before Herod's death, we can confirm this 4 BCE as the correct year of Herod's death. The stellarium application shows the blood moon, a full moon, on March 13th, 4 BCE, Hebrew calendar 13th month, Adar 2. Normally, a full moon like this would be the 15th day of the month, but this month is a 13th month, Adar 2. The full moon month number has been altered from the normal lunar cycle pattern because this is a leap year, a catch-up month. In this case, the full moon, blood moon, is the timestamp of the appointed time. God is the one who chose the Adar 13 at the time of Esther to project the Adar 13 of 4 BCE in which the children of Bethlehem would undergo a genocide. To finish answering why are we starting at 8 BCE? Matthew 2 verse 16. Then Herod, when he saw that he was mocked by the wise men, was exceeding wroth, and sent forth and slew all the children that were in Bethlehem and in all the coasts thereof, from 2 years old and under, according to the time which he had diligently inquired of the wise men. When Herod, being very sick, lost his patience, he ordered the soldiers to kill the children of Bethlehem and the surrounding area from age 2 and under. Why is that? Because the wise men told Herod diligently, meaning accurately, that they saw the star that represented the child's birth about 2 years prior. As a result, if Herod died in 4 BCE, then about 2 years prior would be 6 BCE. If the birth of Jesus is 6 BCE, we need to go back to the beginning of 8 BCE to work forward through the courses of Abia to the conception of John and on to the birth of Jesus. About 6 months after John is born. We have seen one celestial sign tied to a genocide, appointed time on the earth, the blood moon happening about 3 to 4 a.m., early in the morning to catch people by surprise. Yes, all the specific times of the signs are also relevant and plausible in the context. In addition, there is a second celestial sign that confirms for us that March 12, 8 BCE is the actual correct starting day for this string of signs. We find that the celestial signs are like a clock. The numbers are the information and the hand floats above the number in order for us to tell the time. So also, the constellation is the information, like the numbers on a clock, and it is Jupiter, which floats above the constellation to confirm that the sign has been met. If we look up March 12, 8 BCE, and we look to see where Jupiter is, we will find Jupiter in Aquarius. Aquarius is called the water carrier, and it is an image of a man pouring water out of a bucket. Jupiter is the largest planet, a multicolored planet, and therefore, it represents Jesus. We find Jupiter in Aquarius, March 12. 8 BCE. What is the verse that tells us that this should be the case? Numbers 24 verse 7. He shall pour water out of his buckets. Aquarius is pouring water out of his bucket. If you recall, Balaam is silenced by God and can only speak what God allows him. Just before this, pouring water verse, he is in a trance. His eyes are open, and he is seeing the vision of God in his mind, and he speaks these words as he sees a vision of Aquarius pouring water out of his bucket. Numbers 24, verses 2 to 4. And Balaam lifted up his eyes, and he saw Israel abiding in his tents according to their tribes, and the Spirit of God came upon him. And he took up his parable, and said, Balaam the son of Beor hath said, and the man whose eyes are open hath said. He hath said, which heard the words of God, which saw the vision of the Almighty, falling into a trance, but having his eyes open. What are the chances that this verse, within the Balaam star chapter, verse 17, which is describing a water carrier, is in the same year we expect the course of Abia to begin? The water carrier pours water out of his buckets onto the crops for people to drink. Jesus is our provider of the water of life. Here we have Aquarius pouring water out of his buckets, and Jupiter is located there as confirmation that the prophecy Balaam is seeing is in 8 BCE. Jupiter travels around all the constellations once in about 12 years. As a result, starting in 4 BCE, of all the possible years, you only need to go back 4 years, and Jupiter is there in Aquarius. The earliest that Jupiter is in Aquarius is February the 4th, 8 BCE, just over 1 month before the new year begins. He shall pour water out of his buckets. The sign is telling us when to start looking to make an accounting of which day the angel Gabriel visited Zacharias while he was serving in the temple according to the timing of his course of Abia. Luke 1 verse 5. There was in the days of Herod, the king of Judea, a certain priest named Zacharias, of the course of Abia, and his wife was of the daughters of Aaron, and her name was Elizabeth. In case one might think Jesus and his parents spent a long time in Egypt either before or after Herod died, consider Matthew 2 verse 19. But when Herod was dead, behold, an angel of the Lord appeareth in a dream to Joseph in Egypt. They were told that when Herod died, they could leave Egypt. So it is sometime shortly after Herod dies. We were told by Josephus that there is a Passover about 2 weeks after Herod dies. At this Passover, there is a lot of rioting, a lot of death, and the feast is scuttled. Normally to miss a Passover was against the law. Numbers 9 verse 13. But the man that is clean, and is not in a journey, and forbeareth to keep the Passover, even the same soul shall be cut off from among his people. Because he brought not the offering of the Lord in his appointed season, that man shall bear his sin. However, there were a few exceptions. Numbers 9 verse 10 and 11. Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, If any man of you or of your posterity shall be unclean by reason of a dead body, or be in a journey afar off, yet he shall keep the Passover unto the Lord. The 14th day of the 2nd month at even they shall keep it, and eat it with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. The requirements recorded for the Passover in Numbers, chapter 9, say that if a person is in a journey afar off, then they can keep the Passover on the 14th day of the following month. It is for this reason that God had them go across the border into Egypt. Because at that point, they would qualify to skip the Passover of Nissan of that year. And so this is the reason that provides confirmation, along with Josephus, that there was a Passover. They did not need to go outside of the country just to get away from Herod, but they needed to go outside of the country to be excused for not keeping the Passover that was shortly to come to pass. Therefore, they left for Egypt shortly before March 13th, and they returned to Nazareth shortly after the Passover, which was April 10th, about 1 month later. What have we understood? This is only the beginning of a great many signs. At first, one might find such a thing unbelievable, but with each next sign it builds into a glorious perspective of God's communication to us. As the signs accumulate, they defy the odds. Summary of understanding. Celestial events serve as signs and seasons, markers synchronizing with prophetic events. Celestial signs using modern astronomy software prove the Bible's accuracy and God's existence. God placed the signs in the heavens to affirm the sure word of his prophecies, so we will not be unaware. Accounts from the writer Josephus are instrumental in dating the death of King Herod. A lunar eclipse coincided with the fast of Purim, March 13th, Adar 13, 4 BCE. In proximity before Herod dies link this date to the genocide date of the Bethlehem children. Herod's death date is about new moon March 27th, 4 BCE. Interestingly, the date Jesus is circumcised, flesh cut off, in 6 BCE is also March 13th. Celestial signs, specifically Jupiter's location in Aquarius on March 12, 8 BCE, aligns with Numbers 24 verse 7, referencing a water carrier pouring water. Similar to the constellation Aquarius. Jupiter acts like the hand of a clock. When it is present within a constellation, it confirms a sign. To determine Jesus' birth date, calculations trace back to 8 BCE. In consideration of the two 24-week priestly courses leading to John the Baptist's conception and the birth of Jesus 6 months after John is born.